Hello and welcome back. Now it's a Monday morning, meaning we have our motivation segment as always. Today we're going to be talking about the power of influence. That word is being used a lot more these days, especially online. And today we have someone joining us to help expand further. Itunuoluwa Omotayo is a human resources and educational consultant, as well as a transformational coach, someone that equips the next generation with some cutting-edge wisdom and practicable tools. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. So good to be back here.
Okay, so that word influence.
It's a huge word.
It's quite a big word. I do remember when I was growing up that it was captains of industry, MDs, CEOs, people in government that were considered influencers. Now we have a lot of people who have a lot of followers also being called influencers. Now, I have to ask what influence actually is.
Yeah, okay, so thank you for that question, bro. I'll, piggyback a bit to what you said about when you were growing up and our captains of industries and all. I remember that I also had a government official, still in government now, as a role model then, a woman, and there was just something about her. It was probably her courage or the way she dressed and all of that. So what is influence in itself? Influence is a person or a thing's capacity to have an effect on your character, on your development, on your thought process, on your perspective, just generally. So that's the literal interpretation. So I would put it as a person's ability to affect how you reason, how you behave, and how you turn out in a certain way, right? So influence could be direct or indirect. It could be positive, it could be negative, it could be tangible or even intangible, the seemingly little things that we say, oh, it's not a big deal, I picked this up and it doesn't have a negative effect, so to say, right? So influence affects your perspective, your ideologies, your actions, all of which add up to your development, your growth as a person. Okay. So if you ask me, what are the things that influence? There are so many things that influence people, right? People influence, platforms, peers. So I like the conversation. I was telling you the other time that I like the conversation on the coffee chat this morning when you're talking about how sometimes children get influenced by their peers, right? So that is also a form of influence, right? But I'm going to put all of that into two major pathways to say that we majorly get influenced by what we see and what we hear.
What we see and what we hear?
Yes.
Okay.
So what are the organs? Here. What organ do we use to see? Our eyes. And then the organs to hear our ears, of course, not our nose, right? So if you look at so you might wonder, how does your eyes, how do they, trigger influence? How do they influence you? But so if you think about what you watch, for instance,
films, movies.
Yes. Thank you. Movies and
music videos.
Yes. Yeah. Right. How you interact with even your environment and things like that. These things influence you. You will discover that sometimes you read a book and you almost immediately want to make some changes, some adjustments in the way you do things and all that. That is influence, right? Sometimes also you watch a person. Remember I said when I was growing up, I had a government official for a role model. So there was something I saw about her. Probably how she carried, it must have been out. I was so young, how she carried herself. I'm sure if I mention her name, many people know.
Who are you talking about? You don't want to mention her? Okay, all right, go ahead.
Right, it was something about Mrs. Abike Dabiri.
Of course.
Right, so growing up, there was just something about her. I was still very much
a courage, yes.
Yes, a courage.
Mine was Eugenia Abu.
Really?
Yes. But keep going.
Yeah. So when we see people like that, so what you see, what you interact with, the movies that and sometimes even for the movies that we watch, for instance, you watch certain movies and it sort of intensifies your struggle with certain habits. So all of these things under what you see. There's also another aspect of what you see, speaking to who you see, who you surround yourself with, who you study. Right? Because, it's how we say that we are the average of the 5 most important people in our lives.
I was going to talk a bit about that myself. I was going to talk about your closest circle. Now, we're talking about a lot of media platforms, but then we sort of skip over the people that are in our homes. For instance, I mentioned earlier today that helps and nannies end up influencing our children. And, of course, our parents influenced us, and then we also influence our children. So how do we sort of, in quote, make sure that there's a sort of balance?
Balance there. Okay, so let me just give you a quick example to that. You see that there are some adults today that they typically do not eat, for instance, after a certain time in the evening. And it's not because they're watching their weight or anything. It's just because the home that they grew up from, that was the norm, that was the habit. So he sort of grew up with them and all that. So how do you create the balance? First, I would say the foundation, which is the value, and that starts from the home, right? So I believe that the home front is the major place that influence starts for every child, for every young person, even for adults today. I'm sure that if you think about some of the things you do, somehow you can piggyback to when you were growing up, and you know, certain things that you picked up from the home front. An example is a child that today comes across as a bully or, you know, aggressive or something. There's that tendency of coming from a home front where there's a bit of aggression. Right? So when it comes to how to balance it, you also want to be careful about what you surround yourself with, the kind of people that you surround yourself with. And for parents, the role of parents, for instance, things, I mean, so I've taught in a school before, so I've been in the classroom before, and I've had parents that, you know, the child came home with certain, and they came back to school to say, okay, this is what I heard from my child. It wasn't from the home. So I want to find out if this was from, so let's just be able to find out where this came from. So it's also that intentionality to, you know, be careful about what our children pick up and all that. And even for young adults and, you know, older people, the kind of things that you surround yourself with, the kind of conversations that you engage in. Okay, I want to touch on influence and success. So there is there are a lot of books these days. Everybody's saying all the billionaires are reading books, they read 10 books a month, all those things. I'm just thinking about the fact that sometimes there are extremely structured homes that end up not really influencing a child or a young person. For instance, they always say the clergy's daughter is always the most wayward. That's the only example I can give. So I would say the reason why the clergy's daughter is wayward is not because the father is a clergy. So it's probably a combination of other things on the home front. So the parent's personality, let me not assume it's the father that is the clergy now. So the parent's personality, the interaction, the relationship, what the child feels like he or she has missed out on. So there are many factors that could have contributed to a clergy's child, like every other child, turning out wayward, right? So where we try to bring in that touch or zoom in there is because the parent is a clergy. But it could be the same thing for every other child. A clergy's child is like every other child, right? Because every child is supposed to live in a normal environment and be allowed to grow as a child, regardless of, you know, the title or whatever is surrounding the parents. I know that, that's a very... It's a touchy word. Yes. But then is there a way back from it? Is there... Maybe if you've been influenced by having a soldier or an army man or an army parent, is there a way to come back from it? Is there a way to change things after you've been influenced so much by that structure? Yes, so it also still boils back to the power of intention, so intentionality. So when you've realized what this influence has done to you, and remember we said influence could be positive or negative. So there are some influences that you don't want to recover from. It has done something good to you. But if it's a negative influence, regardless of, you know, where that influence came from, parents, peers, environment, wherever, you want to be intentional about, you know, personal development, about evolving. And I think the first place is to realize or recognize that this is not a place to be. This experience or this person has left a negative influence with me, and to, you know, still the word intentionally or practically go back to say, okay, so what is the way back from here? What resources do I need to interact with? Who can help me practically in this? Do I need to seek professional help to break free from the old of this influence in my life, right? So like I was saying, there are different ways by which a person gets influenced, and we've talked about what you see. There's also what you listen to. Okay. Go ahead. There's also what you listen to, right? There's also what you listen to, and an example is music. So social media, for instance, I'm going to use that. So think about... We are going to wrap up because I know you're going to come back another time to continue on this particular topic. It's inexhaustible. It's inexhaustible. But I have to say thank you for breaking it down as much as possible. Hopefully someone at home has learned a thing or two. And we're going to be a little bit more intentional about the influences in our environment. All right, then. We have so much more coming your way. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. We have quite a bit still coming your way right here on Wake Up Nigeria. The show has basically just begun. Stay with us.